Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for staying. My name is Mike Sperlinger. I'm your designated host, and I'm really delighted to be joined by Emilia to my left and Tanya to her left. We've got... are your mics on? Yes, that sounds like it. It's quite something, I have to say. I think it's actually great that we had a little break, because we were just talking about... it's quite intense, actually, to see these on the big screen. I've only seen them on the small screen up till now. I think everyone had to kind of come out of this slightly dreamlike state, maybe, to be ready to speak about them. We've got about half an hour, but we're going to also try and make sure there's time for questions. So please be thinking about those if there's things that you would like to ask. I think maybe it's helpful to start kind of with a big picture question, which is the New Mineral Collective. What is it, and can we become members? Are we members by buying a ticket to this? What is this entity beyond the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, the idea or the seed was sort of planted early on when we started working together. So we met in Tromsø in 2012 when we were doing our master's studies. And our program was actually called Capitalism, Sustainability, and Art. And the program kind of fell apart as it went along. It was sort of a bumpy program for us. But for me, at least, the best part that came out of it was actually getting to work with Emilia and building this sort of platform. And I think like New Mineral Collective actually refers to the idea of having like a new or alternative value or forces in the world, which goes along with prospecting and some other methodologies that we use. But it's a very kind of, it is us, but it's also open because we very often collaborate with others that are also working within these thematics. And we've met a lot of people all over the world, not only Northern Europe, of course, that are concerned with landscape politics and radical geology and the extraction of resources. And so it's a very kind of like fluid platform that is quite inclusive. And yes, you can all be members. We joked a while back that you would have to do a dance, like a mining dance, if you wanted to join. But no, it's quite open, actually.
And there's almost, I guess there's a kind of almost like a slogan for it that appears in the last piece in Pleasure Prospects, that it's the largest and least productive mining company. So there is this kind of promise somehow that it is something also enormous on the horizon, bigger than the two of you.
That's our hope, to join forces with these different points of view for the values, not anymore maybe for values that's driven of this constant extraction and greed, but more, as was mentioned in the text by Queen Latimer, by poetry, pleasure, desire, other values. So passivity or absence can also be very strong in its action sometimes.
Yeah, I think maybe because that goes, it sort of follows this methodology that we work with quite a bit, that maybe I can give the proper definition of, which was actually coined by Kjerstin Ur, who's a landscape architect based in Tromsø, and it's her definition is counter-prospecting is introduced as an experimental and interpretive praxis-based method that operates on two intersecting planes. One, it resists dominant and already given prospects, while on a plane of anticipation, it reaches beyond these in a prospective exchange towards possible alternative futures. And we've been asked, like, what would the ultimate counter prospect be? And I think maybe the ultimate counter prospect would be to like leave land passive, and to not plunge and plunder and extract, but rather leave it passive. And so I guess that would be our approach since we are the largest and least productive mining company in the world, would be to do nothing.
I guess it feels to me, and I think we'll come to this, there's kind of a doubleness in a lot of the works, and I guess you're pointing to this doubleness and this idea of prospect, right? That it's like the idea for these mining companies, you're clearly filming in these expos and things like prospects, like almost a technical term, right? It's prospecting, but it's also this idea that sounds more like this counter prospecting is about potential, the prospect of something, the promise of something. I noticed actually, and again, maybe we'll come back to this, but there's a moment I saw in one of the texts about the work somewhere else, but also in the work, there's a naming at certain moments of 7 prospects, counter prospects, but they were slightly different, I think, at the different times. The one that I read was peace, there were 7, yeah, peace, poetry, desire, passive resistance, water, love, and deep time. But it's different I think there's a different version of it in here. Wait, is this a kind of endlessly mutating list of counter prospects, or is there? Yeah.
It came out of a like public art commission in Harstad, where we were invited in to do a new work for the school, and we were speaking with the students and discussing, like, with a younger generation, sort of what values they would like to see in the world, which is super idealistic question, but it was the material that we used for these sort of terms. And we also have a ongoing and growing glossary and lexicon within New Mineral Collective that is like constantly being added to and changed. And these terms are also within it.
I mean, I think we can talk more about this maybe also through the individual works, because I think there's a lot to kind of, they're quite different actually in their own ways also. But maybe there's one thing that's important we say at the beginning, which is you were both saying actually that this is in a way the first time you've shown these works together in this way. And you made some real choices also about the way the image spilled over the screen. Can you say something about that and what it's like? Because these are each part of installations normally. They're shown in very different contexts, often with other kinds of work.
So, yeah, it's also the choice of these 3 films, because we did several more throughout collaboration. It's also a bit reflecting our chapters in collaboration since 2012. So Hollow Earth was just upon meeting, in Tromsø, and more collaborating with landscape architects in Tromsø, seeing these future upcoming mining projects, seeing the perforated landscapes, visiting these hollow out places. Hollow Earth came out like reflecting on these almost negative pyramids places, or hollowed out mountains in Svalbard, different mines that you don't see straight away, but they are hidden with the mountain crest. So Hollow Earth was installed as a vertical 3-channel tower. So we have 3 editing chapters: aerial shots, if you remember the wheel, ground shots, and underground shots. So camera is always following to the right side and drilling from aerial till reaching the mineral through the microscope. So that's like our first collaboration, more as observers being there. And then the second film, Neon Oasis, was more reflecting on body itself and topographics of body, erotics of counter-prospecting, and pleasure prospects, that the last thematics and topics what we've been working for last 3 years, because it was commissioned for Toronto Biennial in 2019. So the choice was also reflecting the path and our dialogue throughout. So yeah, very, very good to see it also with you in the space.
I mean, maybe that's already taking us into the individual films. Maybe we can start a little bit with Hollow Earth, and because you mentioned already the locations of it. Is it right there were 7 different locations actually? With all of them, are they? What kinds of mines are these that we're looking at? What are they? Very different kinds, or what?
Mostly we were looking what was in the area, so more northern Sweden, Norway, and Spitsbergen. So open pit mines in Kirkenes, in Svalbard, both on Barentsburg side and Longyearbyen, and different kind of trying to have an overview also from different perspectives, talking with miners and talking with reindeer herders. Also important maybe thing to mention was a book, a publication, Hollow Earth. So it's meant to be also with a film, because it has stratas and chapters and conversations with people and researchers and activists and poets that we met along the way. So we go often together.
I mean, that's really interesting, because I haven't seen the book, and it seems such a choice in the film to not have voices. I mean, especially in the first 2 films, actually, to not have voice, to not have this essayistic mode. And for example, the music is obviously very present, and that again was a collaboration, right, with 2 sound artists. How did that come about? Were they traveling with you? Are they field recordings from the places you were, or is it kind of done in parallel in other parts of the north? Or
Yeah, with Hollow Earth, it was actually, or very often it's like taken from field recordings that we do while we're on site, and then they're somehow mixed. And often we work with like electronic or ambient composers, and I guess that's like kind of a flavor of Tromsø, because there's Insomnia and this electronic music festival every fall, and at least for me, it really it sort of shed light on I guess electronic music for me. And so with Hollow Earth, we collaborated with 2 guys that we studied with, and Simon and Örjan, and then Neon Oasis, and also Pleasure Prospects. It's like mostly taken from field recordings and then mixed afterwards. But I guess Pleasure Prospects was a little bit different, because there's also voiceover. That's a different beast, a different monster. But yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can come to that one, because it feels like that does feel like it's a kind of step in a new direction, maybe. I mean, I think one thing that comes out already in Hollow Earth that's kind of interesting is that, like you said, there's a preoccupation with depth and with drilling, and with it sounds amazing with the 3-screen version of this, that you were seeing these different strata physically in the space. But there also seems to be a preoccupation with surfaces and screens and the mediation of these things. So, for example, even in Hollow Earth, we see I don't know what it is, but it's a kind of architectural rendering of the mine carts. Can you just talk about that, about the interplay between those things, between the kind of very, very material, physical interest in landscapes and depth and so on, and then these surfaces, digital surfaces?
That maybe came along while visiting LKAB mine in Sweden. they have a cinema 1 kilometer underground, and they have it's similar size to this, and it's pretty hot because it's more close to the earth core, and they just
What kind of mine is this?
iron. That's how, Sweden remained neutral during war, because also you see the railway tracks, those pallets of iron were sent to Hitler, and it's very good quality iron. So basically, you come to the cinema 1 kilometer underground, and they show you this promotional corporation video, the performance of iron making. So and they have a restaurant there. So it was a compilation also from those LKAB promotional videos. But about each clip, I think we could talk longer, because like each specific clip has a story. Each like microscopic clip, each journey.
Were you going to add to it?
No, it leads into pleasure prospects, but it is about this like interplay between. It's sort of about how you read and measure, and how we as humans sort of understand the landscape through these different technologies, and and that includes like Google Earth and different softwares for acquiring plots of land. But maybe we can get into that later if you want with pleasure prospects.
Yeah.
But it was like, and we often sort of incorporate footage from these industries, and they quite willingly give us the footage as well, or we record it ourselves. But we try and include sort of the perspective that is shaping and forming the understanding of the landscape, also from a corporate point of view. And it started with Hollow Earth, and then it sort of follows in a lot of our videos.
But maybe we can follow that up now, because it's kind of natural in a way, like you say, they kind of bleed into one another, and it is very striking, this idea that there's maybe our preconceptions about mines and that form of industry, like open cast mining and so on, is it's like this. It's a completely material process. It's like the most blue collar activity you can imagine, so on. And yet, like you say, you go a kilometer down, and there's like a gift shop and a restaurant and the same way that in Neon Oasis that we see bits of Las Vegas, and we see. I guess I don't know if this expo. It's clearly like some kind of mining expo where people are selling, and they're kind of the images that they're producing of themselves also on screens, and so that seems that there's already something quite complex going on, that there's not this division between the kind of the real over there and then our relationship to it through our screens, that they're already blurring. But do you want to say a bit more about some of the, I know you said there's like a story behind all of these, every clip in a way, which is maybe what's so hard to unpack, but in Neon Oasis and in Pleasure Prospects, they're really, there are a couple of key sites, it feels like, that they're moving around. Can you say something about the locations, and what those locations sort of where they led your interest in these topics?
I can, maybe I talk about Neon Oasis and you can talk about Toronto. Neon Oasis started actually through members also of New Mineral Collective. They're called CLUI. They're a Center for Landscape Use and Interpretation. They're based in Utah and in Los Angeles, and they're doing really great work with archives, but also with sort of collecting information on the grid that makes up, or the colonial grid that makes up the American landscape. And so with them, we also we were interested in looking at Las Vegas because it was one of the few, it's one of the first sites for the gold rush in America. And interestingly enough, a lot of the shots are from the perspective of like squatted plots of land. So in the beginning, they you could, during the gold rush spirit, you could rush out and just put up 4 posts and stake claims to a plot of land, which is quite interesting of a process, and we're currently getting to know it now better. But it's basically it's this prospecting. So you have to submit data every year. That includes like soil samples. It includes reports made by engineers, geologists, to see if there's anything profitable to keep extracting, and will it lead to the opening of a mine. And so that's what people were doing in Las Vegas, was that they were squatting these plots of land to extract different materials. And of course you need like different laboratories, different additions to your houses if you're, going to be there all year collecting data. So a lot of these are actually squatted plots of land around Las Vegas. And we were interested in looking at those and what they look like, but also not necessarily showing them and not representing them, but taking the shots from their perspective. So it's sort of like a hidden eye.
Do we need like some other music break? Is it like too much information?
It's a lot to unpack, and I guess we're pointing maybe back to the way, like you said, that these are normally shown individually and alongside other elements, and with the book, for example.
Yeah, maybe before Pleasure Prospects, just to continue, Neon Oasis, the way we work together and collaborate, it's really, on the site, and it's often through road trips. We often don't plan specifically, who we gonna meet. We often, for a long time, like, knock the doors, and like it's been like already since 2012, so like 9 years already, us like in this pretty much man-made environments, in this cold landscapes, and maybe Neon Oasis, we wanted to open up and see beyond. Also always thinking about counter prospecting methodology that we use. So trying to see this kind of activism act, how to protect the land from corporations or logging companies, just getting ahead with acquiring prospecting licenses. So this grid map. So we wanted to look also more in different sites around the world. That's why Cluey were very helpful. And also we have had this vision starting with erotics of counter prospecting, the second chapter, more focusing more not just on landscape as in Hollow Earth, but more to body and these different therapies. So in the end of Neon Oasis, we see this sensory deprivation tanks and different spas and infinity pools. We had this vision that we want Las Vegas trip with infinity pool. Of course, didn't have
permission. That was the funding application.
Yeah, but of course, like often we don't have permissions, and it's just like 2 of us, and we kind of have like our equipment and car, and trying to just make it happen,
But you're shooting different formats sometimes as well, right?
Always,
There's some 16mm and video, so it's like it's you and a lot of equipment in the back of the car.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that element, because it's so present? I mean, no, we're moving very quickly, but since you've touched on it, the presence of the body, the female body, and then obviously in the last piece with the performers, like really much choreographed costume performers. Can you talk about that element and where it comes from, where you see that going? Because it seems like something that maybe you're interested in developing more. or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's correct. Like Hollow Earth started more, I think we felt like very much like foreigners landing into, or aliens landing into a landscape that it isn't our own. So really moving from observational to more material based, and this interplay between the body and the landscape. And so with Pleasure Prospects, we worked with a group of female identifying women, and we sort of gave, we had these small discussion groups on which therapy they would conduct or they would do. Therapy meaning also choreography. But I guess it's important to say that, you know, you see this like geodesic dome in Pleasure Prospects, and that was meant to be New Mineral Collective headquarters. It's based in Toronto. It's the first IMAX that was ever made, and now it's empty. And so we kind of occupied this space for some time, and how we worked with the women was also through discussions, and we gave, for example, there's 3 girls that are doing this dance, and you always see them together, and they're wearing these like animal print bodysuits, and that came out of a discussion around mining dances like around the world, because of course it's very like culturally specific. So there's, you know, in Japan they have mining dances, and in South America they do as well, and it's very often like to bring about bounty or like fruitfulness or riches. And so it was actually decided upon amongst the girls what they were mining and what form this dance would take. But you see a lot of circular movements, and that's referring to like drilling. With Color Perez, you see her, she's dancing solo, and also with the synchronized swimmers. They were also meant to make this form that looks like a drill, which we call hydrotherapy.
Yeah, and maybe, this like, I don't think we try to read the landscape only as like female body being extracted and drilled, but it still came with collaborations, with these future maps, topographical maps. It is like a body landscape where these scars been left. So trying to apply these geotrauma healing therapies, we were thinking about acupuncture, comparing it to, you know, these Google Maps stakes. So it's always in comparison somehow, anthropomorphizing body and comparing the scale and measurement. And also body, flotation, sensory deprivation, came observing these different mines in the Middle East, where you've seen like shots of mining potassium in Dead Sea. So, because the mine in itself also became a spa, a healing center there in Dead Sea, where people come to heal their skin and diseases. So they float with their bodies, mining these minerals through their bodies. So body becomes some type of mining tool itself. So I think this flotation ideas also came seeing these comparisons of industry and therapies combined. A little bit in some science fiction way. I remember you were telling growing up and taking swim in this open pit mines that been naturally filled with water and rain, but while you're swimming, you see all that still artifacts of mining gear on the bottom of the fake lake. Also, what we see now in Kirkenes, you know, we were filming this open pit for Hollow Earth. Now we came back, it's already a lake.
I mean, I'm aware of time actually, because I want to make sure that we have a chance to open it for questions. I have one last question. It's just because I feel like, because this is the first time you've re-shown work in Oslo. And I'm just aware actually that I think some members of the audience might have seen this film by Thomas Østby. Do you know, he's a Norwegian filmmaker, and he's got a film that's sort of playing at the moment called Envar Hardet Till, sorry for the pronunciation, which is a really kind of powerful, but in a way very simple documentary about the recent court case in the Norwegian Supreme Court where Natur Ungdom sued the Norwegian government about the constitutional right to the protection of the natural environment against prospecting for oil. But the reason I thought about it just during the screening was I just remembered I saw him present this film, which is, like I said, there's no voiceover, it's just shots of the case. And he presented the film, and the first question that the person asked him afterwards was about the film and about the way it was shot. And he was like, I don't want to talk about form. For me, this is about the issue, and I only want to talk about the issue. This is a film that's only about the issue. And I guess it's just so interesting that there's clearly points of contact in terms of the content, but that's not a response you would give in terms of I'm just interested how you respond to that. Like there's clearly, I think maybe he and you are working from the similar set of urgencies in a way around, let's say, ecology, but with a completely different relationship, it seems to me, to what form can do with those urgencies. I just wonder how you would, how do you relate to that idea of saying we can't even talk about it, we've just got to get to the problem?
Maybe, we're trying to get there also with last research. So Pleasure Prospects for Toronto Biennial, that was curated by Candice Hopkins. It started more, we chose Toronto because it's like capital of, free stock exchange. And that year it was happening the biggest prospectors summit in the world. And basically the first chapter of the film, you see these 10,000 men in suits and all the booths and the slogans. So each country, each community, like presenting and selling their land to be prospected and extracted for. And as our response was our counter proposal for passive New Mineral Collective headquarters. We wish to be there too, maybe with our booth next time. But we're looking into the language and legislations specifically. We actually acquired specific rights for prospecting in Ontario region, and we took mining awareness course. So now we are a little bit in problem. Like we need to write a report and proof of everything what we have prospected to the mining companies in Canada. So we're dealing with that right now.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Yeah. To get back to the question, we use the tools that we have, which is like visual language. That's what we have studied, and that's what we work with. And I think that for me, like artworks that I really love often combine this like form and content, where there's also like poetry and politics that are intertwined. And but we're also very inspired by a lot of like activist approaches, I would say. There's a man, or there's a few examples, but like a man named Peter von Tiesenhausen. He's a Canadian artist living in Alberta, and he he copyrighted every every object on his piece of land in northern Alberta as an artwork. So actually, it stopped like the Keystone Pipeline from crossing his land, and it was like a huge obstruction and a real kind of like it really clogged the sort of flow of industry moving in that area, and and now I read he charges like $500 for anyone to just meet with him from a corporation. So he really like reversed the power dynamic in a way. And I think we're like interested in examples like these, but our tools are very often like lens based. Yeah.
Absolutely, and obviously Thomas Aspie's are lens-based, and there's a rhetoric of him saying there's a lot of form in his film as well. It's just the positioning was interesting, I think. In relation to I really want to open it up because I feel like there are definitely, and there's so many individual aspects that we could have picked up on. So I wonder if there are questions or comments out in the dark. I think we have a roving mic if there are.
Maybe before, straight at the beginning, Hollow Earth was installed as a site-specific piece in this amazing, huge shipyard in Hashta. And at the moment, during the installation, the miners were using that shipyard to build this grinding mill for graphite. So they seen the video installation and they reflected, they discussed about the sites, the locations that they know. We also installed the sound inside the mill that was actually still at the site. So yeah, being I think more like dialogues on the site every time, not like in a larger scale or conference yet. Maybe it's also a good thing because we still have access sometimes and we're not on some blacklist the ways we work, but it's on the edge, So we were trying to collaborate also in Tromsø with geology department and Statoil students, but it's always on the edge, and the dialogue is complicated, I think. Let's see.
I don't think they see us as very threatening.
Yeah.
Is my feeling.
Yeah.
Very often they get a laugh or yeah. But I mean, we are quite strategic in this, how we maybe get access, and also working with different institutes like La Sonde Institute in Toronto, which is there. It's also some of the footage. I think we don't always we don't spill all the cards. Yeah. So, yeah, but yeah, I don't know.
Hello. Yeah. Ooh. So nice to see your work. I grew up in Kiruna, where this restaurant, cinema, mining is, and once brought some friends there from the south. And when you drive into the city, you see the mine on one side and the city on the other side. And they were like, "Yeah, it's so beautiful, except for the mine." But my reaction is like, that's the heart of the city, because like it's employs like 50% at least of the population. But I was just wondering, like, so if you think about that, and then thinking about the last movie you're showing, and like how I guess the how you like penetrate the body, and like how the mind is maybe a wound. Like, but can you, if you would, is it possible to think about it as like the heart? I don't know. Do you, yeah, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, was very like special to be there, because we tried to do like sound recordings maybe 6 a.m. and basically in 50%, but almost entire city just like comes and disappears, underground like ants. So that was like the moment. But I think it reminded us lungs, maybe more as heart, as like this big organ that like makes the city breathe, and it's pulsating and it has its own rhythm, and it is that, the pyramid. So we looked at it both in.
But it also looks like lungs from above the aerial shots. It really looks like exactly like two lungs. So the form of the lung is there actually.
So we saw it not only as a scar, but as a cast, as a monument, as a pyramid, as lungs, a breathing body that is so important and so big that it won't stop breathing, I guess, because now the city will be moved in order, for the lungs to continue to breathe. It's like cheaper maybe to move the entire city than to stop mining, even though it's like cracking.
So to expand the mine, you mean they have to?
It's gonna expand and it's gonna continue. Yeah. The lungs.
I'm curious, like, how you're thinking about therapeutics and, the kinds of therapies that were depicted in Pleasure Principle, like acupuncture and then these dance moves. And it's, and also I think a lot of the soundtracks really reference New Age music. I heard a lot of like kind of licks. I'm like, hearing like old Greek New Age music in my head. And so it's kind of, for me, really referencing that world. And it's a world really full of paradox. And then you mentioned like geotherapy. So the work, like, are you healing humans coping with the earth being ripped up, or are you trying to heal the earth itself, or a bit of both? And maybe if you can just talk about that a bit.
Maybe we were thinking at the beginning more about earth. So more about the perforated landscape, perforated body. Also for Toronto Biennial, we created these casts of the holes, like 3D scans of prospecting holes. And we created this like kind of tapping healing tools using the local soil and the minerals we extracted, like slag, like not soil, slag and copper, to like bring them back to tap those perforated wounds. Also different pressure points in the soil, on the borders. And we have a toolbox, like sculptural probes and tools. So the acupuncture needles some are like 2 meters high, meter high, made from copper. So it's more meant for the earth but yeah, it's liquid, I would say.
But maybe it's also that, like, because our perspective has been so, the gaze is always like, it's so human-centric in a way. So I think also working with like the human body somehow brings it closer to the viewer. So it's not like something that's out there, but actually that's, that there are these parallels between our experience and our existence, and that, and the reciprocal sort of relationship between us and the earth.
And also, yeah, like was mentioning, extension of body also becomes as a mining tool. Like our bodies are mining too. But what are we mining for?
I think we've got time maybe for one more question, because I know we have to kind of evacuate the space at 9. So yeah.
I prefer to speak louder. Can you hear me? I just want to ask your use of like passivity as a strategy of as pervasive, like a strategy. I have one question. Like usually, if you are critiquing something very giant in a scale and so on, being passive, not doing anything, will be more or less understood in terms of the vocabulary that you're fighting against. For example, as a miner, if I am not going to work, my action will be interpreted in terms of how the mining function. You're absent. It doesn't mean anything else. So somehow the language and also the use is somehow defined by the already existing big structures. So how do you appropriate not doing anything, passivity, negation in your own language? How? Yeah, something like that. Is it clear?
Maybe counter prospecting. I mean, dealing with this type of corporations and this constant progress and greed and desire, the passivity in that sense becomes as an action itself. Like, it's not easy, to be just sit and passive. And that's what we dealing right now. Like, we could be sued. Because the moment we acquire that license, we must prove that we will be so productive and we will create so many job opportunities and we will dig the biggest hole. But we just, at least like it keeps the land passive. Maybe what we meant, that it protects the land. It keeps the land passive for 7 years, that license. So it's like more as this shield of protection. So other corporations cannot acquire same plot of land. It's like squatted somehow. It's like leasing it to you or loaning it to you, or you're like kind of renting that plot of land for 7 years. And we were also thinking, I mean, it's like quite speculative, but like imagine if you had enough people do that, then you could really, aside from it being a very large land art project, it could also be like, I mean, maybe it could have some impact if there was, 1,000, 2,000 plots of land that were left passive in a very contested area. So but the language, I'm not sure. This language around it. Maybe we need to think a bit more about that. And we're currently working on a publication, which is also a report
It's this report that we need to give to the Ministry of Northern Developments and Mines in Canada, and so maybe that's something also to think about for the publication, where we have our terms and our activity processes listed, which is probably not what they're expecting to get, but yeah, so that will be released next year.
Great. And just quickly, because I'm really sorry I have to wrap up. I know we have to be out of the cinema, but the show at Kunstnerforbundet is up till Sunday. Is that right? 17th. Till the 17th. And do you also have another show coming up? No.
I'm part of a group show. It's
Yeah.
like a jubileum show at Galleri Format.
Yeah.
It opens tomorrow at 6:00.
Great.
Mm.
Thank you so much for the screening. It was really wonderful. And thank you to the audience so much as well, and for all the questions. So maybe they can come and accost you in the bar afterwards if they have, and buy you a drink with a follow-up question.
Thank you so much.